Hi, everyone. Welcome to the MENA ISC 2020 conference. My name is Jeff Sanderson. I'm the Chief Networking Strategist here at Citrix. And joining me today, I have Kurt Roemer.
And hello, everyone. I'm Kurt Roemer, Chief Security Strategist at Citrix. And today's topic is Zero Trust, the cornerstone of future cyber resilience. We're going to jump in and have a quick look at the agenda. Thanks for joining us today. From an agenda perspective, we're going to cover a little bit of what the current climate is, what are some of the key issues that everybody's facing. We're also going to look at the need for a new approach to security and tie that back into some of the challenges. And of course, that leads many to a discussion of zero trust. When you look at zero trust, there's many different definitions. We're going to cover those, but we're also going to get into some specifics of zero trust across the networking segment, which Jeff is going to talk to in specific. And then as we focus on zero trust, it's a natural extension to talk about workspaces, analytics, and really get into the connectivity aspects that tie all of this together. And then we'll finalize with a call to action where we're introducing some concepts that will help you build out your plans and strategies moving forward. So with that, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Thanks, Kurt. So I've got a little bit of a timeline chart here. Obviously, everyone knows what's happened in the last 6 months. But most of us around March last year headed into this mass work from home situation. And as the quote references, almost an overnight shift to the world's largest working from home experiment. And if we kind of fast forward more to where we are today, we're in this extended work from home situation. What we've seen with a lot of our customers is this has actually accelerated some of their digital business transformation initiatives, specifically related to cloud adoption. And of course, along with cloud adoption comes a rethink regarding security. But if we kind of shift ahead to what many refer to as the new normal, I think what we expect to see is a blend of work from home and work from office. Certainly, we're not going back to how it used to be, for sure. And that blending from home and office really means you've got to think about how you deliver a unified experience to your users as they're connecting from the office, connecting from home, and connecting from other remote locations. So let's take a look at this migration to cloud and the impacts it's having on security. Picture shows the traditional enterprise network layout. Applications in the data center on the right and remote workers and branch workers over on the left. Obviously, the branch connecting in over the WAN and traditionally remote workers using some form of VPN technology. When businesses start migrating to cloud, there's very little impact on the workers over on the left-hand side. And what typically happens is an organization will connect direct into the public cloud infrastructure over some private direct connection, and then allow access to SaaS and web via a traditional security stack. This is problematic because all of the users over on the left-hand side have to backhaul in through the corporate infrastructure to gain access to these external apps. Clearly not efficient and will impact things like performance. So in the new age, what we see happening quite a bit is the ability for these workers to gain access directly to those cloud resources, whether they be SaaS or public cloud internal applications. And this in itself is creating a challenge. It's extending the security out closer to the user, which has brought new tools and technologies, which has created this siloing effect where, these three areas of security that's identified on this chart are really fragmented, different approaches to control and visibility and different skill sets, typically different vendor technologies requiring those different skill sets. Over to you, Kit.
Thanks, Jeff. One of the big concepts behind improving the experience that Jeff's been talking about, both from the worker/employee perspective as well as for IT in the business, is zero trust. Zero Trust has been an evolving enterprise initiative that's greatly intensified during the massive work from home event and migration in 2020. At its core, Zero Trust is a security model that's governed by a single principle. Trust is earned. There is no assumed or implied trust, and all entities and requests are very carefully measured and verified before being trusted to perform requested actions. Note the contrast of this to legacy enterprise security models, where only IT-owned and managed trusted users and devices were allowed access to implicitly trusted networks and applications. When considering zero trust architectures, there are several common reference frameworks. And what you're seeing here are the Forrester and Gartner definitions, including CARTA. You see the Zero Trust architecture from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. ZTNA is very network focused. Google has probably one of the biggest recognized deployments of Zero Trust in their BeyondCorp initiative, which they instituted internally years ago and have a tremendous amount of experience with, and are now starting to roll out to the rest of the world. And Jeff is going to spend some time talking to you about Zero Trust in the context of SASE and why that makes so much sense. Now, one of the other aspects of Zero Trust that most people aren't talking about is privacy. When you think about Zero Trust, it's not just an enterprise concept. It also extends very naturally to your workforce, your customers, and basically all of your relationships, privacy being one extremely important aspect. And so when you take a look at Zero Trust, think about both organizational privacy as well as individual privacy, and make sure you're maintaining that, especially for people who are working from home on their own devices and on their own networks. Make sure that you're designing in an expectation of privacy, and make sure that you're able to monitor for things that are critical to the organization for governance and compliance. Now, one of the other big aspects of Zero Trust is making sure that everything that you do is continuously situationally aware and contextually risk appropriate. So after an organization has declared a state of Zero Trust, we need to make sure that everything in the environment knows what's going on around them at all points in time, and that all your workforce is doing the right things at the right times to protect the security and privacy of themselves, the organization, and your customers. And that's what being continuously situationally aware and contextually risk appropriate is all about. Now, in order to get to the contextual part, we like to use what I call the 5 W's of context, which is who, what, when, where, and why. And when you look at these 5 W's of context, these are not just applied at the point of login. They're applied anytime anybody is accessing a new resource, anytime anyone is utilizing new content, anytime somebody picks up a new device, expresses a new identity or persona. They are working with data of varying sensitivity. They take on a new project that has a higher security classification than the previous one. They're working and being assessed for things like impossible travel. So you can't be logging in from Dubai 1 minute and San Francisco the very next minute physically. You're also taking a look at where people are working from a geofencing perspective, making sure that sensitive data stays within region, especially appropriate for privacy policies. And then increasingly, you're using analytics and behavioral heuristics to analyze why somebody's getting access to this. Is this normal for their role, but they're maybe extending their request capabilities beyond what they should for the current situation? All of these come together to help make sure that you're understanding context in all of your policies and appropriately applying them across all the different situations people are working from. And so when you take a look at Zero Trust end to end, you're really looking at it beginning with the end user or worker, their ability to utilize their appropriate devices, have single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, be part of analytics for analyzing what they're doing and giving them capabilities, as well as giving capabilities back to the organization for control and visibility that are automated from the analytics engine. and ultimately making sure that security policies are consistent. And those policies are things like configuration as code, but they can also extend into culture as code into the future so that we're enforcing our culture through our zero trust approach.
So I'll pick up on that, Kurt. Really, we're going to have a look at zero trust frameworks, and we'll double click down into a couple areas. But first thing to say here is really, when you look at people connecting to applications and everything in between in terms of the connectivity, that's really the extent of the zero trust framework. It pretty much touches everything. When you look at the people side of it, it's not just about protecting the employee and the employee's device and the data stored on there. It's also about protecting the enterprise data that might be stored in a myriad of different locations. Obviously, with things like credential hijacking, it's not only about the access to the user-specific data, but about how that credential hijacking access to internal data. And this is really where secure digital workspaces come in, which Kurt will talk about in a little while. If we go over on the application side, protecting the application, it's the concept of internal applications, and they could be in your data center, it could be in a public cloud or combination of both, hybrid multi-cloud, as well as application data that's stored within SaaS. Clearly that's your data, and you want similar level of security against that particular application data set. But in the middle, you've got this concept of connectivity. And really, as we mentioned earlier about this hybrid working of in the office and remote, really comes down to secure unified access. Shouldn't really matter where you're working from. And as Kurt referenced earlier, it's about being able to use context in terms of where the user is in amongst the trust fabric that you've established within this zero trust architecture. So let's take an overview of a zero trust framework here. And what this graphic shows is really 4 protection zones. 2 related to the people over on the left with the remote access protection zone and the branch protection zone, and a number of capabilities in there. And then over on the left-hand side, again, 2 protection zones related to the application space, one being the internal application space, and then one being external applications such as SaaS, as well as any web access that you're granting your employees. What kind of ties this together is really a common approach to visibility and control, and that's why security analytics is central to this. And as I mentioned earlier, unifying the people side of the equation in terms of remote and office-based access, that's really where the secure digital workspace is a critical component of your strategy. If I try and cast this view looking through a lens of some of the structures that Kurt referred to earlier, the first one to pick up on is if you think about zero trust network access, then its domain is really focused on obviously people over on the left-hand side, accessing predominantly the internal app space. So this is kind of your ZTNA. If we then kind of look through the telescope at a Gartner view, a Gartner SASE view, then much in the same way, it looks at people accessing things from a remote or an office location, and then delivering common capabilities for protecting access to external SaaS and web. Typically, in that scenario, we're really talking about a cloud security service. So let's kind of click down into that. So what does this cloud security service look like? It really is relatively simple in the sense that all of your remote workers or branch workers are connecting through this cloud security service. And here what we're showing is access to the external apps. Also, it would be remiss of me, being from Citrix, not to show the same protection being accorded to the virtual desktop infrastructure within the application space. But it's important that we don't bifurcate these two frameworks of ZTNA and SASE. They really need to be combined and delivered in a unified way. In doing that, you're providing your users a consistent approach to unifying their connection into both the internal app space and the external app space. Speaking of app space, then what we're seeing is really the need to extend that security framework deep into the app space. Today we're in an app economy, and even more so as we kind of move forward in API economy. And if you're allowing any public access to your application infrastructure, whether it be allowing partners in or for B2B purposes, then it's critically important that you're protecting both the application and API structures that you're exposing publicly. Now, it goes without saying that as we move back from this extended work from home period back into the office, who knows what's on our devices, right? There could be some malware lurking that as soon as it realizes that it's in a corporate networking environment, then it could start launching attacks into the application space. So really, you want to accord your internal app space with all of these protections, even if they don't have public access. Back to you, Kate.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And as you take a look at a lot of the concepts that Jeff presented and a lot of the complexity associated with those, you might be thinking, wow, this just makes my environment that much more difficult for people to understand and to interact with. And that's really why one of the concepts that we wanted to discuss was taking this complexity and building it into a secure digital workspace so that the complexity is abstracted from the workforce. They're able to interact with the workspace. All the security policies are integrated with it. And you're doing what we like to call protecting the employee by protecting the workspace. Today this is bringing together a lot of the applications, a lot of the security controls, even application-specific security where you can wrap policy around one particular enterprise app or one particular instance of a browser app. But it's also taking that further and eventually providing some active coaching for the workforce and for the individual employee so that they're making better security decisions and they're affecting better security outcomes. And by doing so, they're definitely protecting the enterprise. And one of the ways that we can do this and provide that active coaching and provide more insights is through analytics. Analytics takes the traditional concepts of logging and forwarding data up to a log aggregator or security incident and event management system. And instead of providing just discrete events, it can also provide correlations so that you can see what someone has been doing over time. Jeff had referenced malicious insider behavior before. You can see how their team might be working through changes to your security policies or through changes to your control environment and whether you're actually improving the employee experience or degrading it. And so analytics gives us a much better picture of what's going on and can actively engage and provide automation for security so that it's noticing things faster than a human would and making sure that it's very consistent with organizational security policy as well as with your culture.
Thanks, Kate. So here we are on the final slide, and what we want to leave you with is a bit of a call to action. We've obviously covered a lot of ground. Firstly, evaluate where you currently have implied trust relationships. It's really these implied trust relationships that create a lot of potential challenges within your existing security infrastructure. With the adoption of cloud and multi-cloud, you should be really thinking about zero trust in terms of that whole migration to cloud. So, and re-architecting that infrastructure with the principles of zero trust. And as Kurt mentioned, embed zero trust directly into your digital workspaces. So ensuring that wherever the user is and however they're accessing their applications through this secure digital workspace, you've got a unified approach to security using the principles of zero trust. And finally, as we talked about the emergence of cloud security, start thinking about adding the concept of secure access service edge in amongst your general cloud migration strategy. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention. Please stay safe and enjoy the conference. And thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.